Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital and Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, one of the fun things about doing a podcast like this is that, like, week to week, podcast to podcast, a lot of your different episodes are going to be different. A lot of your topics are going to move and shift, and a lot of the things you're going to talk about, you're going to hear about things that you've, like, never heard about before. And I'm very interested to get into some of the ins and outs of the gentleman whom with I'm going to speak today. First, I want to welcome Bobby Trimmer from Chesterfield County Fire and EMS. Bobby, welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I very much appreciate your time. Very much appreciate you being here. We'll get into the ins and outs of why Bobby has such a unique experience. Part of that is because, folks, I hope you're sitting down. Bobby has been doing this kind of work since 1984. He's a 40-year veteran of Chesterfield Fire and EMS. And I always like to start the podcast with like a little bit of an introduction, a background, kind of give people a sense of who it is they're hearing from. When you have 40 years worth of experience, it's hard to just sort of like, oh, we're just going to step right over that, right? Like that's a hard thing not to focus on. I kind of want to get into, well, first I want to say congratulations on that. Because listen, the amount of that type of service, I mean, it's virtually unheard of in this day and age. So I very much appreciate everything you've done for the county over the years, and certainly appreciate all of the experience and such that you bring to the table, and certainly you've given a lot over these past 4 decades. But I'm just curious, Bobby, how would you kind of describe how you lasted this long? What's the secret to 40 years in a department like Chesterfield Fire and EMS?
I guess the secret to it is that it's a great place to work.
Yeah.
When I came to the county, I had been a volunteer rescue squad member at Lakeside Rescue Squad.
Yeah.
And at the time, there were about 16 other volunteer members from Lakeside working for the county.
Yeah.
So that kind of piqued my interest. And then I worked for commercial ambulance service for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can do the fire department.
Yeah.
So I came and interviewed. First time I tested, I got hired.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been great.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of opportunities to do many, many different things.
Right.
So every day is different.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you always hear people say they go into this, I want to help the community.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But
right.
A lot of it is your day-to-day challenges.
Right.
You get a feeling of accomplishment
right.
when you leave work every
right.
day.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had the chance to do lots of different things. I'm curious, when you got the chance to do those different things, taking those chances, doing those different things, was some of that driven by a situation, some of those driven by leadership, some of it driven by you? Like, how did you sort of come about wearing all the different hats that you've worn over these 40 years?
There are a lot of opportunities in the fire department, and
yeah.
a lot of those are what you pursue if you show an interest
right.
in doing different things.
Right.
Shortly after getting out of recruit school, I had an opportunity to join the hazmat team.
Right.
And all the training was provided. And
yep.
I've been a charter member of the hazmat team for that 40 years.
Right.
Had an opportunity to be a backup flight medical on med flight
right.
from 86 to 93.
Right. I mean, just those two things right there, even if we didn't get into the other piece of why you're actually here, like that's phenomenal. Like just to think about sort of the sort of sense of like how many people have the experience to be charter, you know what I'm saying? Like that's a very unique sort of situation. Is that something that like you ever spend any time thinking about, or is it just sort of your day-to-day reality and you just sort of go about sort of doing what you do?
I think that was being in the right place at the right time.
Right,
and,
that's fair. Yeah.
And the opportunity with the team being formed. No one had the training at the time, so it
right.
made it easy. You weren't trying to catch up to everybody. But the one thing that I think is very unique about Chesterfield, and I've got friends that work for many other departments,
right.
is that the opportunities, if you have a desire and an interest and you let it be known,
right.
there are many different specialty teams and opportunities. If you want to pursue them, you put in the work and you
yeah.
can achieve those goals.
Yeah. Now, before we get to, before I get to distracted by the shiny objects that are hazmat and, being on that first, Virginia State Police, developing all of that for med flight, I want to talk a little bit about IV fluids. Now, for folks who might not be aware of this, and you might hear more about this as we go forward, but there's a shortage of IV fluids right now, in large part due to the flooding and the damage that happened in western North Carolina from the remnants of Hurricane Helene. And because of some damage to specific companies and factories and different types of interest there, right now, if you go to your doctor, there's a good chance that if you have an elective surgery, they're probably going to tell you to hold off because of this sort of shortage. And the reason we're talking about this today is because Bobby is instrumental in helping make sure that Chesterfield Fire and EMS has what it needs. Matter of fact, the way I understand it, Bobby, is that right now we have enough IV fluids to basically take us out for a year. And you are the person that I think a lot of us have to thank for that because of your diligence and how you do this work. And I'm curious, what goes into sort of making sure that the county has what it needs when it comes to IV fluids and things of that nature? Like, how do you go about sort of making sure that we are taken care of for such a long period of time, even when you don't know, what might happen? I mean, 2 months ago, nobody knew that this hurricane was going to do this damage in Western North Carolina and that IV fluid shortages would be a problem that we need to consider, right? So as you go about doing your work, how do you keep in front of things that you can't expect?
I've got to give a lot of the credit to our resource management division. They stay on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
We watch what's going on out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we were very fortunate when this occurred. We had just placed a large order of IV fluid, and we placed a second order after we heard of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we had a pallet sitting at a shipper. It already left their distributor.
Wow.
And it was delivered shortly after we were told that we were going to go on allotment.
Right.
So we were very fortunate there. But we watch what's going on. We ran into this once before when a hurricane hit Puerto Rico.
Okay.
It hit a plant that manufactured the bags that held the IV fluid. So when we watch what's going on across the country, we try to anticipate. When they were mentioning that the Port of Richmond may be shut down,
right,
we went ahead and made sure we had gloves on order before.
Right.
Because we ran into that with COVID.
Right.
Because
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, you mentioned COVID because my understanding is that one of the things that you're talking about 60% or something at some point at any point, various parts of the operation folks were sick. There were all kinds of considerations during that period of time where, and I think I said 60%. I meant 60 officers. You're talking about testing positive all at once, right? And so you have a moving target, and this is a very sort of similar sort of situation, right, where you're not sure what the thing is going to be, but you've got to be prepared for it regardless. I guess a lot of that speaks to the mission of the entire department as a whole. But I'm just curious in terms of how somebody, you're I believe you're the infectious disease officer for Chesterfield Fire and EMS. In terms of preparation, what's I don't want to say the secret because that's not the right tone I'm trying to take here, but what are some of the sort of guideposts for you in terms of how you go about making sure that the department not only has what it needs, but is staying ahead of whatever those situations might take? Like, what are some of the ways that you kind of go about doing what it is you do?
One of the benefits, I believe, is my office is now located over in the warehouse. So I'm in the warehouse daily. I'm in the EMS equipment room.
Right.
It's easy to keep track of what's on the shelf, what's not on the shelf.
Right.
Work with the staff over at the warehouse. What's on back order?
Right.
If we've got items on back order, we need to start looking for another distributor.
Right.
During COVID, none of our distributors could supply anything. We were very fortunate that we ended up finding a supplier to the federal government that lived in Chesterfield County. And we reached out to him, and we were able to get gowns and gloves and masks when we couldn't get them from any of our distributors.
Right.
And that worked out well. We never ran out of those supplies. When we had partners in other areas that were asking us, do you have anything you can spare?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were unable to get it.
I can imagine too, as you're sort of going through a situation like that, or even now with the fluids, right? That is, as somebody who is, in the thick of it, in the warehouse, trying to, this is where we are with this item, this is where we are with these items. You sort of have a sense over time of how many we actually need, and you have a sense of where the supply is coming from. So you have a sense of like whether you should be panicking about the fact that you don't have an extra pallet or whatever coming, right? And I can imagine over time you've probably had a lot of experiences like that where you're not really sure, like you can't point to a specific number, right, and say, yep, this is too few, right, or this is less than the number we need to hit. There's just a sense, right? Do you have moments like that where it's like you just sort of feel it?
You do, and if you think about Southeast Asia,
Right.
if they're having bad weather, 90% of the raw materials that make all the medical gloves come from there.
Right.
A lot of the glove plants are there, but you have manufacturing plants in different countries.
Right.
But if Malaysia gets hit and the raw materials can't get out, you're going to have a shortage somewhere. So you try to get your orders in before the inventory's gone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So the one advantage of being over there is I get to see daily requisitions. So I get an idea of what our normal day-to-day use is, what the stations are requesting for their supply.
Right.
If we see an uptick in supply, we see they're using more.
Right.
And we try to, is it due to call volume?
Right.
Or do we have something going on in the county?
Right.
Do we need to increase our inventory?
Right.
So it's kind of just having an awareness of what's going on.
Right.
We went through the same thing with H1N1. We went through it with Ebola preparedness.
Yep.
We went through COVID. There's another one that's on the radar with CDC right now.
Yeah.
That a couple of hospitals are starting to work on, and we'll have to have that at our attention for personal protective equipment.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was just thinking in spring of 1985, when you're still new in this whole thing and you're sort of getting used to everything, did you ever think you'd be on a podcast someday talking about what the weather patterns were in Malaysia?
No,
because I'm just sitting here thinking, like, the journey you have had in these 40 years, if you could go back 40 years ago and say, talk to your former self and just say, like, man, it's just some of the experiences you've had, I would imagine would have blown past Bobby's mind a little bit, right? Because it's been, you've gone through some really interesting stuff. Like just the hazmat and the med flight and just talking about these kinds of things. And like that's a very different reality than you probably thought you'd have when you set out in 1984.
It is. When I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a police officer.
Okay.
I was actually in recruit school.
Okay.
And Richmond Police called and offered me a job, and I said, no, thank you. I've got one. I appreciate it, but I think I made the right choice. The opportunities that I've had, I had previous jobs before I came here. I worked for a major hospital supply company that was based out of Richmond. Right out of high school, stayed there for 3 years, working in a warehouse. That wasn't for me.
Right.
So I left there and went to work for an ambulance service. So I got out and got to use my skills, enjoyed that.
Right.
And again, with all the other folks that were at the rescue squad that were already here in the county,
right.
They said, hey, you need to come and apply. You can do that, and you get to do the fire side of it.
Right.
And it was right place, right time, and a good opportunity.
Yeah. In terms of doing a lot of the sort of warehouse elements here, would you say that it's something you enjoy? Is it a passion? How would you sort of describe the work you do in comparison to sort of like your day to day? Like, is it something that there are lots of people who do jobs all the time, right? People who run podcasts, for example, right? And other people go, oh, I just But I can imagine a lot of people think the work that you do, it's absolutely critical, right? And there's some pressure that comes with that. How do you sort of handle all of the various aspects of your job? Is it just something you're passionate to do and something that you have just grown with a lot of experience? How would you sort of describe the way that you approach your current position?
It's very unique. I had an opportunity. I worked in the fire stations for 16 years.
Okay.
A position was developed in the EMS division. It was a competitive position. I applied for it.
Right.
I had some computer skills with Access and Excel that they were looking for some data collection. So I've been in this position almost 25 years, and I basically developed the position.
Yeah.
So the opportunities in there that are different for me versus your average firefighter is I had an opportunity to get involved with purchasing, contracts, suppliers, vendors, biomedical equipment. So it's expanded my knowledge.
Right.
So every day
had to learn more. Right.
You learn more, and then as you progress on further, you end up working with Board of Pharmacy, DEA, because of the pharmaceuticals.
Right.
the opportunities, every day you have a new opportunity to learn something new.
Right.
So it doesn't get stale. Some days are more challenging than others.
Right. Yeah.
But any day you come to work, you've accomplished things and you go home, it's a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now I would be remiss if I didn't ask a question. You have somebody who has as much experience in something like this, and you don't ask them how things have changed. I think you're sort of missing out as an interviewer. So I got to ask, like, over the 40 years, how would you sort of describe the types of changes, the level of change that you've seen, not just in the department itself, but across Chesterfield as a whole?
One of the biggest changes when you go to a fire station and you talk to people and you tell them you had the opportunity to ride tailboard on a fire truck, that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
They're like, oh wow, that was probably cool. So we had the opportunity to ride tailboard. We had some open cab fire engines that we got to ride on. They were different. When I first came here, every fire truck was a manual shift transmission.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, that's come along. The radio technology has improved so much.
Yep.
Everything was done on paper.
Yeah.
We're trying to get as much as possible done on computer for data collection and, storage needs. And I think the people coming into the fire department now, when I got hired, a test site would have 1,400 people come to test.
Right.
So now we're down. We're not getting that interest as much.
Yeah, I got you.
So I think the people that have an interest in the fire department are looking at different careers, and I know police and fire both have difficulty recruiting.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't know what's driving that.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're seeing some impact for those years of COVID where people didn't have interaction and things.
Right.
But even the fire trucks have gotten to be, everything's computerized.
Right.
Now.
Everything's very technical, I would imagine.
The job is, and that's a good example. The job has gotten much more technical. There are breathing apparatus now.
Yeah.
The radios are paired with Bluetooth into your mask so you can talk. So it's clear transmission.
Yeah.
So the technology has creeped into every aspect of the fire service, and it's only going to continue to increase.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'll get you out of here on this. I thought it would be good to sort of talk to you about a little bit about all of these years and what do you feel like you've gotten out of them, and what do you want other people to know about the work you've done and the work you continue to do?
I've had opportunity over the years to be recognized for a number of things.
Right.
I had the opportunity to be firefighter of the year twice.
Oh, nice.
20 years apart, which again, I don't want to blow my horn, but if you can stay that focused and get firefighter of the year 1 year and 20 years later, you get recognized for the dedication and service. I wear that as a badge of pride.
Absolutely.
I was recognized by the Regional EMS Council for Excellence in EMS. I had the opportunity to receive a Star Life Award from the American Ambulance Association.
Right.
So I've had a lot of opportunities in recognition for hard work and dedication.
Right.
And not that, a lot of people say I need to be recognized by money.
Yeah. Right.
Money is a driving factor for a lot of people, but my personal belief, if somebody can come to work, feel like they make a contribution, and somebody recognizes them for the effort they put forth.
Right.
Sometimes that's more valuable than money.
Absolutely.
And, and I think that's one of the things that Chesterfield strives to do is to recognize their employees.
Yeah.
Make them feel like they're valued. And, we have a lot of good employees because of that.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, Bobby, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Obviously, very much appreciate all the work that you do, the work to make sure the department has what everybody needs. Obviously, you can't say that enough about how important that is to the entire operation and certainly to the mission. But very much appreciate your time today to come on the podcast and talk to us a little bit. Appreciate it.
Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's @Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all in word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that you get your shows. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we greatly appreciate it. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website at Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you submit feedback anytime, make suggestions, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, on the weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. Thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. My thanks to you for joining us today. So from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts, newsletters to alerts, social media, the latest community news, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.